Hello, Jacob here. I am one of the co-founders of Braver, and we often talk about doing what we call validation projects. And not everyone understands what a validation project is. So to bring that word to life, I'm now going to spend a couple of minutes showing you what a typical validation project with us looks like and what you might get out of doing one. So, without further ado, let me start by doing a little walkthrough of a project we've done in the past for this company, NAF. And if you are a Norwegian person, you probably know this company, or this organization rather. It's one of the most famous brands in Norway. NAF has been around for 100 years this year. And they have a very, very strong position here in Norway. Everybody knows what NAF is. And everybody also knows what NAF does. They come and pick you up if you get stuck on the road, and they drive you home or drive you to wherever you need to be driven. And this value proposition, this offering, has been the backbone of NAF for 100 years, as I said. But over the last couple of years, something has happened that has challenged the relevance of that value proposition. And those two things are shown here. On the left, we have city living, urbanization. People now live in a different way than they used to, which also means they have different transportation needs. Not everyone owns a car anymore, especially in the cities. And on the right-hand side, you have insurance companies who have started to offer the same pickup roadside service that has traditionally been offered by NAF. So when you have a car insurance, you typically already have this included, which, as I said, makes the NAF pick you up roadside value proposition less relevant for a lot of Norwegians. And this is a classic situation, right, where big company has had a great deliverable or a great value proposition for a long time. Then that gets challenged, and what typically happens then is that it goes like it did with these guys, not very well, and not a situation you want to end up in. And of course the reason why that happens is, just move myself out of the way here, is that the old way, or the way the world used to work, made your product or a certain organization's product super relevant. And then the world goes through a big change, and that product is no longer as relevant as it used to be. So instead of fading into relevancy, luckily enough, it's a forward-leaning organization, so they decided to do something else to stay relevant, or to become relevant for a completely new customer group. And this is where we in Braver were lucky enough to get involved. And NAF had identified bicyclists as an interesting new possible group, new possible customer group for them. And obviously the leap from providing services to car owners to bicyclists is there's something there that's different. So we were asked to come in and do again what I call a validation project, meaning can we validate whether or not it is a good idea for NAF to create some kind of offering for bicyclists? Is that something they should do? Is that something they should invest in? Yes or no? And the long story short of that project is that the answer was yes, that was a good idea to pursue something for bicyclists. And as of this writing today, the service called NAF Sykkel, which is a membership for bicyclists with a bunch of relevant services included in a membership, currently has over 15,000 paying customers. We basically help NAF go from idea on a whiteboard to these 15,000 customers via a bunch of iterations, via customer insight, via building something, showing that thing to customers, tweaking on that thing, making it better and better, going to market, that whole spiel. But it all started with validation, validating that if NUF were to create some kind of offering for bicyclists, enough bicyclists would want to buy that to make it a good investment. Now, how do we figure that out? How do we figure out if enough people want to buy something before that thing exists? Because that is really the essence. You want to get that answer before you spend millions and millions and 2 years building something. The answer is to sell things that don't exist yet. And that might sound a little weird, because what are you selling if it doesn't exist? What are you putting out there to the customer? And the answer to that question is that you put out something that looks real, that feels real, but is not actually produced yet. And then you try to get them to pay for it. And if they want to pay for it, if they want to pay for the value proposition that you propose, then you know that there is indeed a willingness to pay out there. And then you can go back and actually build the thing, create the product or the service. And this is a way to think about early stage validation that is very, very foreign to most big companies. Because most big companies and large organizations, they work in what I call the 100 to 101 way. And 100 to 101 means that your job is to take something that exists, a core business line or a core service offering, and tweak that thing ever so slightly year over year so that it becomes marginally better and better and better. Marginal innovation, marginal improvement. So if you have something that works and you are trying to make that thing work better and better over time by doing small tweaks to it, that is 100 to 101 thinking or methodology. But the way we work is quite different. So we work in what I call the 0 to 1 domain, or using the 0 to 1 method, which is completely different from the 100 to 101. Because in 0 to 1, you don't really have anything. Nothing exists before, so there's nothing to tweak and optimize and fine-tune. You have to create something from nothing, which is a different kind of game, a different kind of sport than tweaking something that already exists. And this is where you need entrepreneurial people, you need risk-taking people, you need a culture that is often very different from the 100 to 101 phase. You need different incentives, you need a different way of working, you need different tools. And again, the whole stack or everything is different in those two phases. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, it's just very different games. And to pull on that game analogy a little further, I like to use this picture, because at the outset you might say that two games like tennis and ping pong, they seem pretty similar conceptually. They're both about relatively small balls, rackets, hitting the ball with a racket within a certain area on the playing field, similar number of players, one-on-one, etc., etc. But despite all that, if you have any kind of knowledge of the sports, you realize, or you know intuitively, that they are completely different. You do not expect a tennis pro to also win the world championship of ping pong, and vice versa. Because even though they, on paper, seem very similar, they are indeed very, very different sports, very different games, very different rules. And the way to operate to win in one game does not necessarily translate over to the other game. And that's the same with 100 to 101 versus 0 to 1 in a business context. They're totally different games, and they need to be treated differently. So then you might ask, what's wrong with 100 to 101 thinking and that way of working? What's wrong with marginal improvements? And the answer is that there's nothing conceptually wrong with that way of working as is. The only problem is that, as this guy says, big businesses tend to get very good at their game, at their 100 to 101 game, marginally tweaking their existing business model. And that works, seems to work for a long time, until suddenly it doesn't anymore, because the world has changed. And when the world changes faster and faster, as it seems to do these days, as illustrated here on this fine graph showing the average lifespan of an S&P company, meaning if you get into the S&P 500 index of the biggest companies in the USA, how long can you expect that company to stay in the index before it gets kicked out by by someone else more innovative taking its place? And not too long ago, that life expectancy was quite long, 60, 50, 40 years. But we see a clear trend that this is falling year over year, decade over decade. So now it's down to around 14 years, meaning that the pace of innovation has increased. It has increased so much that it doesn't work anymore to just lean back on your own business model for forever. Essentially, you have to continually innovate to stay relevant and to survive and thrive for the long term. When we talk about innovation, it's quite easy to end up in this kind of cliche thinking about bring in a bunch of innovation consultants with post-its, and then let's brainstorm and ideate and get a bunch of ideas up, and that's going to solve things. But what typically follows a process like that, especially in a big company, is this bit on the left here. Nothing really happens after that. You get a bunch of ideas up, they hang there until the post-it glue gets old and they symbolically fall down from the wall and get swept away. So that's the one thing that happens typically. Or the other thing that might happen is what we see here on the right side, where someone makes a big investment decision. There's a huge project kickoff, some kind of celebration. We put on a team. They're gonna run. They're gonna run the straight line towards this launch point that we see up here, and that's gonna be wonderful when we get there. And that unfortunately very rarely happens. You've probably seen that a couple of times in your own career if you've been in corporate innovation for any period of time. This never works, and that's probably not a surprise to you, because I would assume that you have read all the books about how to innovate in a big company, how to do it and how not to do it. You know that you're supposed to do validation, do experimentation, follow the lean startup method, talk to customers, make prototypes, all that jazz. You've heard it on keynotes and you've read it in the books. But as we all know, that's not what happens in reality very, very often. And why is it so difficult to put this theory from these books into reality? Because of the culture that sits in the walls of most big organizations. That culture is all about doing things right, don't messing up, don't putting your head forwards too much, don't taking unnecessary chances, unnecessary risks. So instead of doing the risky, messy stuff that we are supposed to do according to these books, like talking to customers, making prototypes, testing things. Instead of doing that, we end up here. We go to the safe route, we go into PowerPoint or we go into Excel, and then we make beautiful slides, incredible business models that on paper are fantastic. And as we probably all know, the things we make in slides and in Excel, they are dreams. They are theoretical dreams about perfect futures, and those dreams are rarely built on any kind of underlying foundation of proof. And that's a problem. And if we think about the risks involved in any kind of new business development or new business venture, we can group those into this risk hierarchy that we see here, where most corporates, how they approach a new idea or a new case is to start at the top and figure out that this one is okay, spend a lot of time with the legal department to get the green light on all kinds of regulations, and then they move down stepwise. So if it's legal, yes, okay. Is it possible to build this technically? Yes, okay. Then let's go into Excel, make a glorious business case. And then when all this is said and done, maybe 6 months, 12 months, 18 months have passed, and we might then build something and bring that to market and realize that, oops, we forgot to check that it actually generates enough customer value for this to make sense to bring to market at all. What it typically looks like is something like this. You start with some kind of assumptions top down, and then you work your way down to a glorious business opportunity that on paper looks great, but you haven't talked to any customers, you haven't figured out how to deliver this product, and so on. You've only done these theoretical top-down paper calculations and exercises, desktop research. So what we propose instead is that you don't do that. Instead, you flip this around. So you start at the bottom and you make absolutely sure that if you are to build this service or this product, it will generate enough customer value to make enough customers want to pay enough money for this thing to be worth your time and your investment. And if you can validate that, which is what our validation projects are all about, if you can validate that, then you're in a much better position to then build a business case based on real world learning, real world experiments. Build your business case on proof, build it bottom up, instead of building it on risky assumptions from the top down. And then after you build a business case and you see that that makes sense, then you can start asking, is it possible to build this technically? And then finally, is it legal? How do we make sure this fits all the legal criteria? And there's another point why it's worth working from the bottom up here, and that is that if you have a product or a service idea that generates enough customer value, you can deliver it in a UX, user experience way that makes sense for the customer. It makes financial sense, and it's possible to build it technically. It's very, very, very rare that it is not legal, that's a problem, which is why it makes very little sense to start at the top and work your way down, because this is so rarely a problem in the end. Same thing with technical. If it's green light on the 3 first levels, then in most cases it is possible to build it technically. That's not where the big question lies typically. So to start wrapping this up, we have a saying in Norwegian: don't sell the fur before you've killed the bear. And that saying implies that you should be a trustworthy person, that you should not oversell things you can't deliver. And that's a great ethos for life in general. But in early stage innovation, in early stage venture building, it's not very helpful at all. I indeed advocate for exactly the opposite, to sell first and then build and deliver later. Because if you can't sell, there's no point in building. There's no point in building that product or that service. So make sure before you do anything else that this value proposition or this idea that you have in mind will indeed sell in the marketplace. Okay, jumping back to NUF with the NUF bike example. NUF was a classic 100 to 101 organization, and probably still is in 99% of what it does, which makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because they have great existing, traditional, mature offerings into the marketplace, and it makes sense to spend most of their energy tweaking and improving those things, making those as good as possible. But on top of that, we were allowed to work in the 0 to 1 way with them on this new thing, this bike idea. And there we were free in the NUF bike team to follow a classic 0 to 1 way of working, classic lean startup methodology, where we start by building a prototype, showing that prototype to customers, measuring the response, learning from those responses, and then improving the prototype based on those learnings. And then we would spin around and around and around that circle for as long as it took to come up with a value proposition, a coherent service that made enough sense to customers that they were indeed willing to pay for it. And again, today there are 15,000 paying customers on NUF Bike, and it's a project that we are very, very proud to have been so deeply involved with. Obviously, NUF is not the only company we have done innovation and validation projects for. Here are a couple of others that we have been fortunate enough to get to work with. Many big, mature, traditional companies in Norway and the Nordics who typically are characterized by having a core business that works well and also having ambitions to find other extra additional business opportunities, typically a little bit outside of the core business. So what typically makes a good validation project with us is that you in your big organization have some kind of need or some kind of ambition to create something new, a new business opportunity, a new corporate venture, whatever. We combine that with our expertise in early stage company building, in validation, in product development, and we see what comes out if we join forces, so to speak. So that's all I had to say for now. If this piqued your curiosity in any way, please get in touch. You can click somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where on the screen, to book a call with us, and we would love to have a chat. Have a good day.